Creative Mornings. This is such a great space. A bunch of creatives get to come together and hear a different topic and how someone just views that word or concept. I love Creative Mornings, and so thanks for having me this week. So, humility and pie. So I was going to call it Humble Pie, but if you're around Denver, Humble Pie is actually another pie shop in town. So I thought that would maybe break some copyright rules or something, so we'll just call it Humility and Pie. And my name is Shauna, and up front, please don't judge me based on my creativity by this PowerPoint slides, because I am not the best at PowerPoint, that's for sure. So don't judge me by that. And I make pie, so that's what I do. And pie, a little bit about the history of pie, just so that you guys know, is that it's been around since the Egyptians, so long, long time ago, and they used to fill reeds, and so they would just eat the filling. And so they'd fill reeds and eat that. It came over here with English settlers to America when the English settlers came over, and they used to be called coffins, so instead of crust, it was called a coffin. And crust came about way, way later. So the main point of pie was actually the filling in the beginning, and which is different than now, because I teach a crust making class. So like crust for pie is one of the biggest parts of pie for people. They love crust. But it used to be mainly just the fillings. So more realistically, instead of baking pie, I actually run a business called the Long Eye Pie Shop that makes pie. So most of my time is spent running the business. And as Audrey had said, what we do is our whole point of the business is to hire at-risk youth to give them a first chance at employment. So baking is a very small piece of running a pie business. So I used a pie chart. That is one thing in PowerPoint I could figure out how to do. So baking is a small, small piece. Business management is another piece. And then if anyone here has started a small business, you know that for a while you're working multiple part-time jobs as well. So I work at a nonprofit in town called the Mile High Workshop, which I'll talk about later. I have an event planning business. I run some people's social media. So I do a lot of other things other than baking pie. And before we go on, I just want to take a little poll really fast. So I know what kind of audience I'm working with here, but can you raise your hand? So we're going to do pie versus cake, like the ultimate question in my mind, pie versus cake. So if you're a cake person, raise your hand, please. Okay. Oh, you! No! I did this thing with Andrew at the MCA on Pie Day, and I can't believe I feel betrayed right now. Okay, cake, pie? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm working with the right audience. Okay. So we're going to move on to a little bit about my thoughts on humility. So this is my favorite quote on humility, and probably one of my favorite quotes of my life, actually. So humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So a lot of people think that humility is, I think, so being humble. So you kind of like are meek, you put yourself down some, those kinds of things. But I like this thought on humility because it's actually just thinking of yourself less and thinking of others more, which is how I like to run my life and business. And so we'll unpack that through the story of how the business unfolded as time goes by. But this week, I want to give a little shout out to Kylie. Kylie's over there? Raise your hand, Kylie. Okay, so Kylie is a letterer in town. I, last minute, really wanted this quote lettered, so she did it for me, which is awesome. It's really beautiful. She also is selling prints of that, not today, but you can get on her website and buy them. So just to note that. So humility is actually about character, your heart and mind. I think the action from humility, having that as a piece of your character, comes in the ways of hospitality. So hospitality is just welcoming in a visitor, a guest, a stranger into a home, safe environment, all of that. So humility in action looks a lot like hospitality. So we're going to go on a little journey together through the Long Island Pie Shop. So just keep that definition of humility in your mind as I'm talking through some of the things that we've gone through on our journey as a business. So humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So I was a social worker. I worked with youth and refugees at a place in town, a nonprofit in town that all of them were living with HIV. So I had 144 youth and refugee clients. If anyone has ever done social work, you're going to feel the weight of 144 youth and refugee clients. So this is kind of how one of my youth kids, and I'll tell you a specific story in a little bit about this, but this is kind of how one of my youth kids would come through. So unemployed youth, then they apply for a minimum wage job, some sort of probably fast food kind of place. They get hired at the minimum wage job. Then a barrier to employment comes into play. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then they get fired from that minimum wage job, and then they're unemployed again. And so when I tell you the story of this kid, Jesse, in just a minute, you'll understand how that makes their life really unstable, which is the reason why I started this business, is to help with stability in that. So getting fired from a minimum wage job at Wendy's and then being homeless again for 6 months and trying to get another job is really hard, and they just get in this cycle, and it continues and it continues and it continues. So trying to break that cycle is basically what we're doing. So little interactive time. When I say barriers to employment, can you guys yell out some things that you might think are barriers to employment? What? ID, okay, yep. Education, transportation, healthcare, what? ESL, so English as a second language. Anything else? So here's a very practical list that I saw a lot of barriers to employment with kids who are teens. When I talk about, just so we clarify, when I talk about youth, I'm talking up to the age of 25. They're actually pushing adolescents to 26 now, which is crazy if you think about that, but up to age of 25. So barriers to employment, poverty, so a lot of those things that you guys yelled out kind of fall in that poverty category. Homelessness, substance use, mental health, unstable family environment, disability, criminal background. If you have a felony on your background and you go apply for a job, you're probably not going to get that job because someone else is going to get that job that doesn't have a felony on their background. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about a kid named Jesse. Jesse is the reason why I started this business. So I worked at that nonprofit for 5 years, and I got Jesse on my caseload pretty much as soon as I got hired there. Jesse got diagnosed with HIV when he was 16. Jesse comes from a family, pretty unstable family environment, a lot of drug use in the family. He started using meth at a really young age, and was also in prostitution, which we would call like survival sex is what we'd call it. So basically he just needed a place to stay and food and money and clothes, and so you just do that to get those things. So Jesse comes in at 16. I have him till he's 21 when I leave. And over those 5 years, this is long term. So, and with 144 clients, you don't get to see every client every week. And so Jesse was one of my clients that I saw almost every 2 weeks, unless he was on a major like benders or if he was in jail, basically. But so he would come in and we would work on very small goals. So it'd be like, so with drug use, we would be like, could you go 1 day without using meth? Could you go 2 days without using meth? So very small goals. So we're going to fast forward to 5 years later. Jesse got his GED one time that he was in jail. He was using only like every 3 weeks, so he could go 3 weeks without using. He applied for college. We were applying for scholarships. And he was like really starting to dream towards the future. And the crazy thing about that was just him and I sitting in an office once every 2 weeks for an hour. And it was an ounce of belief. So I'm sure that you guys can think about in your life, I can think of a bajillion people, but someone in your life that gave you an ounce of belief in a time that was hard and that you thought you couldn't do something. So if you think about the place where you're coming from, like he's coming from an unstable environment, he is, in a major drug culture, a really kind of hard place. And that small ounce of belief can open up places of dreaming. So for me, I looked at that and I said, okay, I have 144 clients that most of them I don't even get to meet every 2 weeks. But I saw this crazy change over 5 years, mind you, in this one kid. And what if I could just hang out with some kids like 10 hours a week and have one-on-one time with them in a kitchen? Or for someone else, it could be a different business. Mine just happens to be a kitchen. And pie, for me, just happened to be a medium in which that I could do that. So pie is a family thing for me. Pie is like the great American dessert, and I'm from the Midwest originally. I'm from Indiana. And my grandma always had a pie on the chest freezer when we'd walk in the house. And so during this time, pie started coming back up, a few years ago for me. I started baking it again. And friends were like, this is good. So those two things kind of collided at one time, this Jesse story and me starting to make pie again. And so I just tried it and jumped on into that business. But Jesse being the catapult for me to do that. So this is the revelation I was just talking about. I forgot that this was a screen actually in here. But one youth, a lot of belief, dreams, and community impact. That seems very simple-minded. I like things that are kind of simple-minded. And so that's kind of that was my revelation with Jesse. So to go through the business, June of 2013, I was still working my social work job. I launched at the Fellow, you guys know Fellow magazine at all? So Fellow magazine, Bree, the founder of that, and I are close friends, and we had dreamt those things together, sitting drinking a beer, 6 months prior to this date probably, and then I launched the business at the Fellow magazine event and got some great connections from that. So fast forward in December 2014, I quit my social work job and went FullTime Pie. That's how I say it to people. But I became a baker full-time. Did a successful Kickstarter, ended in January of 2014, raised $21,000 to start the business and build out an Airstream trailer, which is next. This was the day I picked up Stella. Her name's Stella. She's our mobile pie shop right now, and so that is Stella. My dad and grandpa came out, so I love family, and my family is very involved together. So my dad and grandpa came out. They're sweet, sweet men, and my grandpa's a contractor, and my dad's a fire chief. So with all of our skill sets, we built out an Airstream, and she looks like this inside, if you haven't been inside of her. She looks like a farmhouse kitchen. So that is purposeful for me. So it's not a food truck that you like walk up to a window. You actually come inside. You can't see it, but on the other side of this, there's like a bar you can sit down at. And that, I just really wanted it to feel like your grandma's kitchen, feel like home in there. And then we launched July 2014 at Huckleberry Roasters, which is a huge partner of us. And then we hired, story number 2, Sunny. So that was our first kid this last summer that we hired. By hired, there are these amazing programs in town that actually help at-risk youth get jobs, specifically during the summer. And so we partnered with Urban Peak. I don't know how many of you guys know Urban Peak, but this last summer we partnered with Urban Peak. And I interviewed some kids, and Sunny was the one I hired through Urban Peak. So great thing about that is this grant that Urban Peak had, they paid for Sunny. So as a small business, I didn't have to like hire someone right off the bat, but I could still do what my mission was in that. So Sunny. Sunny's 21. He lives in Denver. Urban Peak is the homeless shelter in town. So he was technically homeless at the time. He was crashing at his sister's place. He did not graduate high school. He had, over time, I realized more and more, he had a lot of mental health and substance issues that were undiagnosed and untreated. But Sunny and I got to hang out all summer in the kitchen together, one-on-one. When Sunny came into the kitchen, he didn't even know how to cut a pepper. Like, he had never cut a vegetable before. So coming from places of poverty, they're getting a lot of stuff from food banks, to be quite honest. And a lot of that is canned stuff. It's not fresh things. So cutting vegetables actually isn't a skill he had. So we learned how to do that. But most of the time in the kitchen, we were prepping things, but we were talking a lot about life. We were talking about family stuff. We were talking about ex-girlfriends, new girlfriends, all kinds of things. And with Sunny, he was with me for 4 months until the grant ran out in that section. And he went to jail, I think, 3 times during the 4 months. And the crazy thing is that every time he went to jail, I was his call from jail. So, I mean, if that tells you anything about the stability of his life, that his new employer is his first phone call from jail, that just kind of like, just to have that concept in mind of like where he's coming from. And so for Sunny, being able to actually go to jail and have grace enough on the other end of that he could have a job still when he came out and have 4 months of stable job on his resume and a good reference is the point. That's what my goal was in that, was to be able to give him that and work on skills in the kitchen and social skills. And the main thing we worked on was how to talk to your boss appropriately. I mean, it is like, it was amazing, the things he would say to me, and because it is a fine line, right? Because he trusts me, and we laugh in the kitchen, so it sort of feels like we're maybe friends, but really I'm his boss, and so that was the main thing we talked about all the time, was how to talk to your boss. Like, I sent him home a couple times because he could not communicate appropriately in the kitchen. So it's just, those are kind of the lessons that we're looking at here. So in summary, 2014 was a crazy year. So kind of what's next for us, that's a great question. I feel like I feel like if you've ever owned a small business, or if you've, talked to me anytime recently and you ask me that question, my main answer is, I don't know. I don't know entirely where we're going. I think in small businesses, it's like every day you're trying to make those decisions of what to do next, and how to best keep moving forward. And for me, with that goal of home, so home is where the pie is. That's what we love. That Dan Garza, I don't know if you guys know him, but he designed that for me. That home is the main value for me. And I think going back to like humility and the action of that being hospitality, just bringing in strangers, making them feel like safe and at home, and that's what I want to do for the kids, and that's what I'm doing for my customers. So home is the main value. So we're working out of that. So here's a couple things I know that are for sure next. Stella's for sale. So if anyone wants to buy Stella, she's for sale. Because one thing that I realized over the last year in that whole home safe environment model, Stella is so cool, and I and my dad and grandpa put a lot of work into Stella. And I don't want to sell her, but if I'm going from that place of home, for the kids that I work with, that actually creates an unstable environment for them, because she's mobile, and so she's moving around. We're at different places. They have to meet me at different places at different times, all of that kind of stuff. So at the beginning of this year, I re-looked back over the last year, because you always want to like keep processing and assessing those things. And so this was one of the things that I decided was, we need to be in a more stable environment for the youth that we're working with. So Stella's for sale. We're writing a cookbook, so we're starting a cookbook series. It's called Not Your Granny's, and it's going to be a series. So the first one's pie. Annie Herzig is an illustrator in town. Her and I are collaborating on this. So that little nut up there has a cocktail with bourbon in it. That's funny. We will continue doing classes. So with the cookbook and the classes, honestly, I would rather you take a class than buy a pie from me, because that class can teach you how to make pie, and then you can go home, make that pie in your house, and sit down at the kitchen table with your family with a fresh baked pie. So that, just in our values of home and hospitality, we do classes, and so that's going to continue on. We can also drink cider together on the 4th Tuesday of every month at STEM Ciders, and it's a cider pie pairing, and it's $20, yeah. And then we continue doing partnerships. So Huckleberry Roaster is a huge partner for us. You saw them earlier. There's Pie Day Friday, so right now there's pie at Huckleberry. This was my dream team from last summer. That's what I like to call them. Sunny is not pictured in this picture, but so 2 interns. Laura, if you guys know Laura, she works at like Winter Session, but also like a lot of other places in town. Andy Megal is Mile High Workshop, which I'll talk about them in a second. The one thing about small business that you also figure out is that if you can't pay people, eventually they have to get real jobs. So I call this the dream team, because that was last summer when everyone was kind of like super excited and working, and now mostly it's me, because they all have to find real jobs to work. The thing we are going to be doing is partnering with Mile High Workshop. So this is a little plug for them, and also telling you about what we're doing with them. But Mile High Workshop is actually, I have a part-time job there as well. That's one of my part-time jobs. And they are a place that hires people with barriers to employment, and they help small businesses grow. So they do production. So they're moving into a new building where they're going to have a kitchen, a wood shop, a sewing shop. They have an etching machine. all of those kinds of things. And so if you're a small business that's like has production stuff and you're looking to grow, you can talk to me about that later. And we are going to do, there's some things that I can't necessarily talk about right now in the business because they're new and I don't want to broadcast it to everyone. But there's some stuff that we're going to do with them in regards to some production kinds of things and more shelf-stable items, because the whole point is that I get to hire more at-risk youth in this business. So I'm trying to think, how do I grow the business to a place that we do that? So, applause. These are kind of all the people that I talked about and all of their handles. Yeah, totally. So, any of photography, logo design, lettering, cookbook illustration, all of that, any of those needs, feel free. And we'll be at the Denver Flea is our next event. So the 17th and 18th, we're at the Denver Flea. Annie, who's doing the cookbook, and I are doing portraits and pie for $10. So you can get a slice of pie and your portrait drawn for $10. If you want to contact me, then there's all my contact information. I love to drink coffee or whiskey or margaritas or anything with anyone, so feel free to contact me about that. That is $1 million question. And so that is kind of what I've been asking myself. So with the new production models that we're doing, so pie, let me clarify really fast. I don't know how many of you have, owned a bakery. Bakeries aren't awesomely profitable, but pie, the profit margin on pie is really low. And so, because the ingredients, especially if you bake pie like I do, with I try to use the best ingredients. We have farm partnerships during season, obviously. Try to do as organic as possible. So the profit margin is low. So that is the question I'm asking myself right now. And what I've realized is that I have to, for a bakery, I have to, and for every business this is going to be different, but I have to move past just baking the pie, and I need to have other products. So that's why I'm looking into shelf-stable items. Like one of them, I can tell you one of them. One of them is like crust mixes. So we have a gluten-free crust that we have nailed and honed in that it tastes almost exactly like my regular crust. And so I'm pretty proud of that. And one of those dream team, an intern of mine actually developed it. I didn't even do it, so I'm not even gonna take credit. But we're gonna start, bagging that and selling that. So we can then distribute that to grocery stores. So then that becomes like a production thing that you can hire a lot more people to do. Does that make sense? So I think the helpful part for me was that I was a social worker before. So measures of success for me are probably look different. And I'm just personally where I'm at right now is I'm a creative by nature. And so all last year I was just doing the creative art scene, kind of let's develop the coolest pie recipes and all of that stuff. And then all of a sudden this year I realized, wait a second, you are also a business. And you have to make this sustainable. So that's kind of the stuff that I was just talking about. So measures, I'm trying to figure that out. For me, it has been about the people, So with Sunny, it's like he, decreased alcohol use, or he learned how to cut a pepper. That's success to me. So I'm in the process of learning more and more of the numbers of success. There's been a lot of challenges. Okay, so I'll do two. One is with the youth, learning how to be an employer, not a social worker. So that's a different thing. But with my personality, trying to figure that out. And then the other piece I think would be the numbers game of starting a business. So having enough finances up front to just launch a business, and then having to make those hard decisions, So for me, a piece of selling Stella is that value. A piece of selling Stella is that Stella's the Airstream. I refer to her as like she's a person, sorry. Is capital, so she's all my capital. And so if I want to launch into something that's going to grow the business past baking pies in a kitchen, then I have to sell Stella because that's my capital for my business. So I think the challenges have been making hard decisions, not that sometimes are counterintuitive to what I actually want to do sometimes, but yeah, the hard decisions pieces of it. My name for my company, the Long Eye Pie, what happened, I used to live up in Boulder with a couple of my best friends, and we would have Tuesday night dinners, because the table is very, I don't know if you got this throughout the presentation, but home and the table is really important to me. So we would have Tuesday night dinners, we were drinking wine, and I was trying to come up with a business name. And we're all a little like nerdy kind of girls. And so Long Eye Pie has a long I sound in it, everyone. So Long Eye Pie got birthed. And the next weekend was the fellow event. So I was launching a business. And then since it took off so quickly, I couldn't change the name. So it just stuck. And the only thing I changed was the branding. So hilarious, I'll tell you this short hilarious story. But the first branding was just a circle, and I had, laminate, I don't know if you guys have ever carved stamps, but I sat on my back porch and I carved a stamp that was a circle and a cursive small long I with the long I sound over it. And that, I stamped all my business cards the first round with that and everything, and then finally, like 3 months later, I finally got branded by a professional designer, but I carved my first stamp. So yeah, that's how the name came to be. Yeah, so I worked in nonprofits for 10 years, and so when I hope I don't say anything that's offensive to nonprofits in this answer, so I'm sorry if I do. I work for a nonprofit right now, part-time, so I love nonprofits, but I saw also the struggle in that, because though we want to think that grants and government money and all this stuff is going to be around forever and ever and ever, it's not. So you have to figure out ways to be sustainable. So one of my main goals, which, you know, maybe a year, 2 years down the line, maybe I will go into nonprofit world because I'll feel as though that's where we need to go. But I wanted to be a for-profit from the beginning and be sustainable so that we could generate our own stuff. But we partner with nonprofits. But there's a struggle in that. There's a struggle both ways. Like nonprofits, I would spend half my time, which I've done this at other jobs, writing grants. So, I mean, I feel like it's one or the other. I don't even know what's better. In the beginning, I was very staunch on like, social businesses should really be for-profit businesses because that's going to help your sustainability in the long term. Now, I mean, I know social businesses in town that are nonprofits, but a lot of them have started underneath a nonprofit. So that nonprofit is their like money, that's their cash, and someone else is writing their grants and getting the grants for them. In a one, main person business, I don't even have time to like write the grants to do that. So I've wavered on that over the last year because a lot of people are like, why aren't you just a nonprofit? That makes more sense.